Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. Every company has a story to tell, from the small startup to the large enterprise, and everything in between. This is one of them. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Here we are. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining CyberSecurity here at ITSPmagazine Podcast Network. I am Sean Martin, your host. I'm live, sort of, from Infosecurity Europe here in London, Excel. And as you can probably hear in the background, the vibe is almighty. There's plenty of activity going on out there. And in the press room, and I'm thrilled to have Simon Hodgkinson on with me. Simon, how are you?
Very good, thank you, Sean, and thanks very much for the invite. Looking forward to the chat.
This is going to be fun. There's hardly anything more exciting than operational resilience.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure we'll touch on it, but for me, it's rooted in risk, and I'm a geek, and I love to talk about risk. But anyway, we'll get into what it means to you and what it should mean to fellow CISOs and others in the security leadership role. But before we do that, a few words about who you are, Simon, some of the things you've been involved with and what you're up to now.
Perfect, thank you, Sean. So I was the former Chief Information Security Officer at BP for the last 4 years of my corporate career. And prior to that, I ran global infrastructure and operations for BP as well. So those roles were really rooted in the whole question of resilience. Since leaving BP, I'm now an advisor to Semperis and a couple of other companies as well. I really joined Semperis because they are at the very heart of resilience. They work specifically in Active Directory, which is fundamental to operational resilience of any business.
Yeah. The identity is the core of pretty much everything, not just people, but systems and networks and access to data and you name it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's I want to maybe quickly touch on the shift from, because I think this will be an important part of our conversation, the shift from infrastructure ops to cyber operations.
Yeah.
And your role as a CISO. What was that like? Because the first part was all about really enabling business and keeping it going. And then cyber is protecting what was built to run the business, and this is my simple mind view of it. So maybe kind of talk to me about how that shift was and how you leveraged that experience in your cyber role, and maybe some things that you think folks can learn from you in terms of sticking with resilience here, of course.
I mean, it's a great question, and you know, in the infrastructure and operations role, I managed everything from data centers, networks, end user compute, field services, and I also used to do our customer satisfaction survey. And I used to get some pretty robust feedback through our customer satisfaction about, you know, just how ineffective the IT was for the business to do their job. But it was incredibly secure.
Right.
So, you know, as I worked with the then CISO as we went through our cloud network, workplace and identity transformation programs to reset that, and we moved away from, you know, buying everything that was best of breed to thinking about the world from the end user perspective, so that sort of customer view of the customer-centric view of the world, and to try and give them a consumer-like experience. But in a big enterprise, you know, you still got to manage that big risk of cybersecurity. So getting that balance right was always challenging. So then moving into the CISO function, it was about that continuation of the message that we're not here to do cybersecurity. We're here to enable the business, and in BP's case at that point it was about getting hydrocarbons out the ground, refining the product and selling it. There was a lot more to it than that. Of course, there's a lot of different aspects of the business. But fundamentally getting that message set that actually we're here to make the business resilient, we're not here just to do security, was a big mindset shift.
Yeah. And so I know I wanted to get your definition of resiliency, but I first want to maybe one more point on this, because Well, I would say probably the majority of folks here in the hall are looking at traditional IT networks, and some may have a play in the OT space. But I presume you have a particular view of what resiliency looks like, given your experience in both of those worlds, and how does that play into the cyber role as well? So kind of the IT-OT mix. And
So absolutely, and in the OT space, you get the extremity of, you can't just deploy any of this software you're seeing out on the floor in the OT space, because potentially it can cause a safety event and fatalities and or explosions or what have you. It's so for me it was about mitigating controls. So people talk in the IT world about you've got to patch, or you've got to put all of these standard controls out there. You simply can't do it in the OT world. And perhaps one way of describing that is the right refresh cycles in technology in IT is probably in the 3 to 5 year time horizon. In OT, it's probably 8 to 15 years. So this notion of being able to just apply those standard IT controls in the OT controls in the OT space is a misnomer. You can't do that. And actually, when people try to do that, you end up with a lot of resilience from the engineering community in that OT space, because you're trying to take this generic cyber thing and say, you've been doing it wrong for years, you need to apply these controls. And that's why you get this huge amount of friction between the IT and the OT community. And therefore, working with the engineers who are really smart people and want to do the right thing, pragmatically talking about risk in context of the myriad of other risks they have in the environment, like safety risk or mechanical and engineering risk, is really important. It's kind of empathy, getting that empathy with the engineering community to make sure that what you're applying is appropriate to the risk that they're trying to manage.
Yeah, and understanding and empathy, I love that. And where I have empathy is in the dynamic nature of the IT infrastructure. It's so dynamic, right? And so many things change, so many things are coming and going. Talk to me about your definition. Let's focus in on IT. Your definition of resilience, where parts are moving, business is changing all the time, threats are always changing, becoming more sophisticated, and kind of to our point earlier, you need to know what you're trying to protect. That could be an individual, could be a customer, could be a partner, could be a device, could be a sensor, could be an API. Talk to me about kind of how you look at resilience. What does resilience mean to you in that context?
So I think the English definition of resilience is perfect. The ability to withstand or recover quickly from an adverse event. So you can't just come with this mindset as I'm going to secure everything, because you can never do it. Every company in the world will be breached. Probably the vast majority of them already have been breached. So this notion that you can secure a company is flawed. So you've got to do the very best job you can at understanding what's critical to the business, applying the appropriate controls to enable the business to do their job, but having the appropriate security controls in place, but also being able to respond to an adverse event as well, not forgetting that ability to recover if something bad does happen. And as you might imagine, in this world of accelerated digitalization, as a security team or a CISO, or trying to keep your hands on all of these different points of light that are cropping up everywhere, it's like a game of, I don't know if you know the term whack-a-mole.
Yeah, exactly.
It is absolutely like a game of whack-a-mole. But what's really critical is understanding what is most important to the business and making sure those things are protected. And it's not just about your own technology, it's about things like supply chain. So one of the biggest incidents that I've been involved in happened to a third party who was a logistics provider, and we had no supply chain resilience. Right. So when they got hit by a cyber attack twice in 3 months, they weren't able to deliver product to some of our stores. and therefore you get stockouts, and that means reputational damage with your customers. They go in for fuel, but actually they go in for fuel, but they want something like coffee or so you've got to make sure that you think about resilience in totality, not just IT and cyber. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does, and I was just, sorry if you're looking like he's off somewhere. I'm just thinking, of course, you actually have retail as part of the business in your VP role as well, which has a whole slew of things. So how do we look at I don't know, regulation and policy and things like that from a resilience perspective? Do you think those help, or do you think
You really put me on the spot now. I think sometimes they drive the wrong culture.
Right.
They drive a culture of compliance, which is not right. You know, you need to be doing dynamic risk management. You need to understand as the business changes, how do you need to respond in terms of appropriate controls in the environment, and making sure that systems and processes that enable the business to deliver on their outcomes are resilient, as I said, in terms of people, process and technology. I think they're helpful in organisations that really haven't done much at all around cybersecurity, because it forces it's a forcing function. But I also think sometimes the regulators misunderstand what they should be doing. So, you know, a lot of the regulation should focus on things like security of supply. So like NIS as an example, how you secure that supply should be down to the businesses. So for instance, if you have a cyber attack that takes a component out of your business, but you're able to fulfill that by using a partner, that should be, in my view, you should comply with the regulation. But actually it's more viewed from the regulator's lens about your cybersecurity posture.
So the theme of this show this year here at Infosecurity Europe is rethink, right? The power of cybersecurity is kind of the tagline under it, I believe. And so your work with Semperis, how are you seeing them rethink this challenge of resiliency and rooted in identity? And I'd like your perspective on that, where they're an international company supporting global multinational organizations around the world that have different regulations and different cultures and different requirements. So how do you see that Semperis rethinking this problem?
Brilliant question. So I think first and foremost, if I can just step back to the whole notion of kind of the resilience question. We're here to support the business. People forget that without identity, there is no business. Through COVID and the acceleration of digital, pretty much every business now is a digital business. And you can't survive a prolonged loss, because frankly we're fairly impatient as consumers. So if somebody's down for multiple days, the chances are you're going to go and adopt something from somebody else. So you get a lot of attrition within your customer base. You get regulators on your back if you get an issue and what have you, and you see the FCA regulation coming out now around your ability to be resilient to specifically cyber, but should be IT, prolonged loss of IT. So I think so remembering that we're here to enable the business to be successful, and identity is absolutely core to that. Semperis has moved into a space that says actually recovering Active Directory is phenomenally difficult. For most reasonably sized organisations, we're talking probably 2 days if you get everything right to recover AD, and you have to recover AD before you can start recovering anything else in your environment. How many businesses can survive with 2 days of outage before you start recovering your core applications? So what Semperis have done is really look at that kind of pre, during and post breach approach in the notion of resilience. So able to withstand. So let's put monitoring of configuration drift in the environment, looking for indicators of compromise and exposure, and auto-remediating those, so you stop bad things happening where you can, but bad things will happen. And then on the reverse of that, then being able to recover quickly through high levels of automation. And you know, you can see people that have taken or plan on days of recovering AD now planning on hours with Semperis' solution. So what I really think they fit very firmly in that kind of operational resilience lens. And I don't often talk about Semperis in terms of security. I always talk about it in terms of resilience, because you've got that pre, during and post breach capability. But you know, I'm delighted to be part of Semperis, and it wasn't just the technology, although I am a bit of a geek, having 38 years in IT, and the technology is great. But actually, I love the culture. I love the fact that they are a highly inclusive culture that embraces, you know, all diversity, and therefore you get to the question about globality of the company and dealing with lots of different global organisations. In fact, the top global organisations in the world that are spread across all jurisdictions. You know, it fits our culture really well, because we're so open, we're so welcoming. Mickey Bresman, who's the CEO, you know, talks about, you know, the importance of inclusion, and I see, and I'm not an employee of Semperis, I'm an advisor, but I'm very lucky to sit in on some of their meetings, and that's what really inspires me, is that actually they will be successful because they get the very best people by creating the very best environment for people to be successful.
Yeah, we know many of the team there, and I'm excited to meet even more. We actually just, before the conference, we had a chance to speak with Dan and Guido, and we got into some really interesting use cases. So for people who want to listen to that, we take a completely different view and have a completely different conversation than you and I just had, but still very relevant in terms of resilience rooted in identity. And to your point, Simon, it's much more than just the durability part, right? You actually have to handle, kind of to my point earlier, the dynamic nature of these environments, and things are coming and going, and when something bad happens, you need to recover as well. So I love it. Any final words, Simon?
So I just add as well, I mean, people here talk about security and they're always using kind of militaristic language about sort of bad actors and all of these names and the malware definitions and what have you. Don't ever forget, misconfiguration is the biggest growing vulnerability in the environment, and AD is no different, and Azure AD is no different. And that's the big holes that the adversaries will attack. But also don't forget that we have humans that manage this stuff. They make mistakes. So in terms of your resilience journey, you've got to be able to protect your employees against making those mistakes and recovering quickly from those environments. And it does happen very, very frequently.
These are complex environments. So,
absolutely.
Well, Simon, it's been a pleasure. I think I could chat with you for hours. Maybe we will at some point have another sit down. But I want to thank you for joining me here, and hope the show is a success, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Lovely, thanks Sean, it's been a delight.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you learned something new and this story made you think, then share ITSPmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.